The great hall of the Keltharian Empire filled with beings from across the galaxy. Representatives from 1,000 different worlds gathered under the crystal dome that showed the stars beyond. Today marked something special. Today, the Empire announced its most important event of the century. Emperor Zethmora stood at the center of the hall. His forearms spread wide as he spoke to the crowd. The translation devices made sure every species could understand his words. For 1,000 years, our galaxy has known peace through strength, the Emperor said. His voice echoed through the vast space. For 1,000 years, the greatest warriors have proven their worth in combat. Today, we announce the Centennial Tournament of Blades. The crowd made sounds of excitement. Some cheered, others clicked their claws, and a few species created musical tones that showed their happiness. The tournament happened only once every 100 years. It brought together the finest warriors from every corner of known space. The rules remain the same as they have for a millennium, Emperor Zethmora continued. Only energy blades may be used. Only those who have trained for decades in the art of plasma combat may compete. Only the pure and disciplined may enter the sacred arena. Near the back of the hall, a small group of beings stood quietly. They looked different from the others. They had only 2 arms, pale skin, and strange hair on their heads. These were humans, representatives from a small planet called Earth. The humans had arrived just 3 days ago. Their ship was small and simple compared to the massive vessels of other species. Most beings in the galaxy had never heard of Earth. Those who had heard of it knew it only as a dangerous world far from civilized space. Ambassador Chen stepped forward from the human group. She was a small woman with dark hair and serious eyes. She raised her hand to speak. "Your Majesty," she said in clear galactic common, "Earth requests permission to enter the tournament." The hall fell silent. Then slowly, laughter began to spread through the crowd. It started with small chuckles and grew into loud sounds of amusement. The idea seemed ridiculous to most of them. General Kethvash of the Veltar stepped forward. The Veltar were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They had won the tournament for the last 3 centuries. Kethvash was tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished metal. His 6 arms moved with perfect grace. "Humans," he said, his voice filled with amusement. "Do you even know what an energy blade is? Have any of your kind ever held one?" Ambassador Chen nodded. "We know of them, General, but we request permission to use our own weapons instead." This caused even more laughter. The Emperor himself looked confused. "Your own weapons? What weapons could possibly compare to energy blades? The plasma cuts through any known material. The neural interface requires decades of training to master. What could your primitive species possibly offer?" "Steel," Ambassador Chen said simply. The word caused confusion rather than laughter. Most species in the galaxy had stopped using metal weapons thousands of years ago. When energy blades were invented, they made metal weapons useless. An energy blade could cut through any metal in seconds. Master Yelthara of the Council of Sages spoke up. She was one of the oldest beings in the galaxy, with wisdom that spanned centuries. "Human, you speak of steel as if it were something special. But steel is just iron and carbon. Any energy blade can destroy it easily." "We understand that," Ambassador Chen replied. "But our request is not based on the strength of our weapons. It is based on our right to compete with the tools we know best." The Emperor looked thoughtful. The tournament rules had never forbidden different weapons before because no one had ever asked. Energy blades were simply the best weapons that existed. Why would anyone want to use something inferior? "Tell us, humans," the Emperor said. "How long have your warriors trained with these steel weapons?" "Some for 20 years or more, Your Majesty," Chen answered. "Our greatest masters have studied the sword since childhood." General Kethvash laughed again. 20 years? I have trained with energy blades for 60 years. My youngest warrior has trained for 40. Your weapons are primitive and your training is insufficient. "Perhaps," Chen said, "but we still request the right to try." The Emperor spoke quietly with his advisors. Energy blade combat was an art form. It was beautiful and precise. It required perfect control of mind and body. The idea of using crude metal weapons seemed almost insulting to the sacred nature of the tournament. But the Empire prided itself on fairness. Any species that could reach the tournament world could request to compete. The humans had made the journey. They had the right to ask. "Very well," the Emperor finally said. "Earth may send its warriors to compete, but you must understand the rules. Combat continues until one fighter yields or cannot continue. Death is rare, but injury is common. Are you certain you wish to face energy blade masters with only steel? We are certain, Your Majesty, Chen replied. The formal announcement went out across the galaxy. The Centennial Tournament would take place in 6 months on the neutral world of Nexus Prime. Hundreds of warriors would compete in single combat. The winner would receive the greatest honor the galaxy could offer. Most beings were excited about the upcoming tournament. The Veltar were expected to dominate as usual. Their warriors were like living art when they fought. They moved with perfect grace, and their energy blades painted patterns of light in the air. The humans became a curiosity. News reports across the galaxy showed images of human weapons. The steel swords looked crude and simple compared to the elegant energy blades. Experts tried to explain how human weapons might work, but most agreed they had no chance against energy blade technology. Dr. Melthana, a famous weapons expert, appeared on the most popular news program in the galaxy. The humans show courage, she said. But courage alone cannot overcome physics. Energy blades operate at temperatures that can melt any metal instantly. Even if the humans are skilled with their weapons, the weapons themselves cannot compete. The Veltar began preparing for the tournament with extra enthusiasm. General Kethvash declared that he would personally demonstrate the superiority of energy blade combat by defeating the human champion himself. It will be educational, he told reporters. The galaxy will see the difference between true warrior skill and primitive weapon play. Perhaps the humans will learn something useful. Other species also prepared for the tournament. The Jukteri brought their four-armed fighting style. The Moldovan practiced their spinning blade techniques. Each species had their own variation of energy blade combat, developed over centuries of tradition. The humans received little attention in the preparation time. Most news reports focused on the major species and their famous warriors. Earth was mentioned only as a curiosity, a footnote in tournament history. But on Earth, something different was happening. The small planet that most of the galaxy ignored was getting ready for war. Captain Sarah Chen, Ambassador Chen's sister, stood in an old building where humans had once made weapons for ancient wars. Sparks flew as master smiths worked metal the old way. They folded steel thousands of times, creating blades that sang when they cut through air. They think we're primitive, Captain Chen said to her team. They think our weapons are weak and our training is insufficient. They expect us to fight like them, to follow their rules and their traditions. She picked up a finished sword, testing its weight and balance. The blade was perfect, sharp enough to cut through steel but flexible enough to bend without breaking. But we're not going to fight like them, she continued. We're going to fight like humans. And they have no idea what that means. The tournament was 6 months away. Across the galaxy, alien warriors practiced their beautiful traditional forms. They prepared for battles that would last exactly 27 minutes, as all proper energy blade duels did. On Earth, humans prepared for war that would last seconds. The human delegation arrived at Nexus Prime 3 weeks before the tournament began. Their ship was small and simple compared to the massive vessels that filled the orbital stations. Other species brought hundreds of support staff, coaches, and media teams. The humans brought 12 people total. Captain Sarah Chen stepped off their transport with her small team. She carried a simple metal case that contained her weapons. Behind her came the others: Weapons Master Kenji Nakamura, Tactical Analyst Dr. James Wright, Combat Historian Professor Maria Santos, and 8 fighters. The orbital station buzzed with activity. Thousands of beings had come to watch the tournament. Alien news teams recorded everything, eager to capture the greatest combat event in the galaxy. Most cameras focused on the Veltar delegation, whose warriors moved like dancers even when simply walking. Look at them, said Zalmora, a reporter from the Galactic News Network. She pointed her recording device at the human group. They look so ordinary. No ceremonial armor, no energy weapons, no meditation crystals. How can they possibly compete? The humans ignored the attention and made their way to their assigned quarters. The rooms were basic but clean. Through the large windows they could see Nexus Prime below, a world transformed into a single massive arena complex. Captain Chen gathered her team in the main room. She activated a privacy screen that would prevent alien listening devices from recording their conversation. Status report, she said simply. Kenji Nakamura opened his weapon case. Inside were 8 swords, each one different from the others. They were made from folded steel, carbon fiber, and other earth materials. Some were straight, others curved. All were sharp enough to cut through bone. "The weapons are ready," Kenji said. "I have studied the arena specifications. The gravity is 0.8 Earth normal. The atmosphere is standard. Our blades will perform exactly as they do at home." Dr. Wright activated his portable computer. Images of alien warriors appeared on the screen, showing them in practice sessions and previous tournaments. "I have analyzed 300 hours of energy blade combat footage," he reported. "The patterns are very predictable. Every species follows traditional forms that have not changed in centuries. The Veltar use the flowing wind style. The Jacteri prefer the 4 points method. The Moldavan always begin with the spinning star formation." "Weaknesses?" Chen asked. "Many," Wright replied. "They treat combat like a dance. Every move follows rules. They announce their attacks with preparatory motions. They never attack immediately after defending. They pause between sequences to reset their stance." Professor Santos added her analysis. "I have studied their tournament history going back 500 years. Average combat time is 27 minutes and 14 seconds. No fight has ever lasted less than 15 minutes. They consider quick victories to be unsportsmanlike." Chen nodded. This confirmed what they had learned on Earth. Energy blade combat was an art form, not warfare. It was beautiful and impressive, but it followed rules that would get warriors killed in real combat. "What about their weapons?" she asked. "Energy blades are remarkable technology," Wright admitted. "They can cut through almost any material. The temperature reaches 6,000 degrees at the edge. They are powered by small fusion cells and controlled by neural interfaces." "But," Chen prompted, "but they have limitations. The neural interface requires perfect mental discipline. If the user becomes emotional or loses focus, the blade becomes unstable. The weapons also have built-in safety systems that prevent certain types of attacks, such as throwing the blade causes automatic shutdown. Using it in close grappling triggers safety mode. The neural interface is programmed to prevent dishonorable combat techniques." Chen smiled grimly. The aliens had created perfect weapons for their perfect combat sport, but they had never considered that someone might want to fight to win rather than to perform. Over the next 2 weeks, the humans prepared carefully. They studied footage of the tournament grounds and learned the layout of the arena. They observed alien training sessions from a distance, noting the predictable patterns and traditional forms. The aliens were impressive. When a Veltar warrior activated his energy blade, it created a beam of blue-white plasma that hummed with contained power. The weapon moved like liquid light, leaving trails in the air. Master warriors could make their blades dance in patterns so beautiful that crowds would gasp with amazement. But the humans were not impressed by beauty. They were studying for weaknesses. "Look at this," Dr. Wright said, showing footage of a Veltar practice session. The warrior telegraphs every attack. He raises his blade high before striking down. He steps back before lunging forward. He announces each sequence with body language that our fighters learned to read in their first year of training. The humans practiced in private, away from alien observers. They did not use the beautiful flowing movements of energy blade combat. Instead, they drilled the brutal, efficient techniques that had kept humans alive for thousands of years of warfare. Marcus Rivera, one of their fighters, worked with a steel katana that Kenji had forged specially for him. The blade was perfectly balanced and sharp enough to cut silk scarves in half, but more importantly, it was designed for speed. "Remember," Captain Chen told him as he practiced, "they expect a long ceremonial fight. They expect you to announce your attacks with traditional forms. They expect you to fight with honor according to their rules." Marcus cut through the air with quick, simple strikes. His movements were efficient and direct. No wasted motion. No telegraphed attacks. No pauses for form or beauty. "What they do not expect," Chen continued, "is a fighter who ignores their traditions completely. A fighter who attacks immediately without warning, without ceremony, and without stopping until the fight is over." The human training focused on adaptation. They practiced against holographic energy blades, learning to fight weapons they had never seen before. They studied the tournament rules carefully, looking for anything they could use to their advantage. Dr. Wright discovered something interesting in the rulebook. "Listen to this," he said. "Combat begins when both fighters assume ready positions and the ceremonial words are spoken. Combat ends when one fighter yields, becomes unable to continue, or when the arbiter declares a decisive victory." "Decisive victory?" Chen asked. A hit that would be lethal in real combat even if the safety systems prevent actual death. The rules assume that energy blades cannot be defeated by other weapons, so they do not specify what happens if an energy blade is destroyed or lost. Chen smiled. The aliens had written their rules for energy blade combat against energy blade combat. They had never considered what would happen when someone fought differently. Meanwhile, across the station, General Kethvash led the Veltar delegation in their traditional preparations. His warriors meditated for hours each day, achieving the perfect mental state required for energy blade control. They practiced the ancient forms with religious devotion. The humans continue to amuse me, Kethvash told his aide. I watched their delegation arrive. They carry simple metal weapons like museum pieces. Their fighters show no discipline, no spiritual preparation. They will provide an interesting demonstration of why primitive methods cannot compete with advanced technology. The Veltar were not cruel beings. They simply believed absolutely in the superiority of their way of fighting. Energy blades were the pinnacle of weapons technology. Their combat forms had been perfected over thousands of years. The idea that crude steel could compete was not insulting so much as impossible. Other alien species shared this view. The tournament had become a chance to watch the humans fail spectacularly. Betting pools formed, with most aliens wagering on how quickly the human fighters would be defeated. I give them 30 seconds, said Commander Zeltak of the Moldavan. Their metal weapons will melt the moment they touch an energy blade. Too generous, replied Master Vel Shannon of the Crystalline Collective. I predict 15 seconds. Maybe 10 if they try to attack immediately. The humans ignored the speculation and continued their preparations. They studied, they practiced, and they forged new weapons. Kenji Nakamura worked around the clock, creating blades that met the specific needs of each fighter. For Linda Kim, he made a rapier designed for quick thrusts. For Robert Jackson, a broadsword built for powerful cuts. For Sarah Chen herself, he created a katana that perfectly matched her fighting style, developed over 20 years of training. These weapons are not as advanced as energy blades, Kenji admitted, as he showed his work to the team. They cannot cut through anything. They cannot melt steel or stone. They are just sharp metal. He picked up Sarah's katana and tested its edge on a piece of paper. The blade cut through it cleanly with no effort at all. But they are perfect for killing, he continued. They are fast, reliable, and deadly. Most importantly, they do not require perfect mental discipline to use. They do not have safety systems that prevent dishonorable attacks. They are tools of war, not art. Captain Chen took the katana and felt its weight. The balance was perfect for her height and reach. The grip felt natural in her hands. This was not a ceremonial weapon or a piece of art. This was a tool designed for one purpose, ending fights quickly. The tournament would begin in 5 days. Around the station, alien warriors continued their beautiful traditional preparations. They meditated, they practiced there. The tournament began with great ceremony. The arena on Nexus Prime could hold 2 million spectators and every seat was filled. Beings from across the galaxy had traveled to witness the greatest combat competition in known space. Emperor Zeth Mora stood at the center of the arena floor. His voice carried to every corner of the massive structure as he opened the tournament with words spoken for 1,000 years. Let the worthy prove their skill. Let the devoted show their art. Let combat reveal truth. The crowd erupted in cheers that shook the building. Energy patterns danced in the air above the arena, as different species showed their excitement in their own ways. The humans sat quietly in their designated section, watching and waiting. The first matches began with traditional pageantry. Warriors entered the arena wearing ceremonial armor and carrying weapons that gleamed with contained power. Each energy blade was a work of art, its plasma field colored and shaped according to ancient traditions. Master Zethkar, the blade singer, represented the Veltar in the opening ceremony fight. He was considered one of their finest warriors, with 60 years of training and victories in dozens of tournaments across the galaxy. His energy blade hummed with blue-white fire that seemed to dance to music only he could hear. His opponent was Growlmoth of the Jakteri, a four-armed fighter whose spinning blade technique had made him famous throughout his home sector. Both warriors were masters of their art, and the crowd expected a display of incredible skill. The two fighters met in the center of the arena. They bowed to each other with formal respect, then took their positions exactly 20 meters apart. This distance was traditional, allowing each warrior to demonstrate their opening form before engaging in combat. Zethkar raised his blade in the salute of the rising wind. The movement was graceful and precise, creating patterns of light that pleased the watching crowd. Growlmoth responded with the 4 points greeting, his blade spinning around his body in a display that required perfect coordination of all 4 arms. "Combat begins," announced the Arbiter. What followed was beautiful. The 2 masters approached each other with flowing movements that looked more like dance than fighting. Their energy blades met in showers of sparks and light. Each attack and defense followed traditional forms that the crowd could recognize and appreciate. Zethkar used the flowing wind style, his blade moving in curves and spirals that seemed to bend reality itself. Growlmoth responded with 4 points techniques, creating geometric patterns as his arms moved in perfect harmony. The fight lasted exactly 27 minutes and 34 seconds. Both warriors demonstrated incredible skill, pushing their abilities to the limit. In the end, Zethkar achieved victory through a particularly elegant application of the singing blade technique, creating an opening that allowed him to touch his opponent's chest with his plasma edge. The crowd went wild with appreciation. This was energy blade combat at its finest, a perfect demonstration of skill, art, and tradition. Both fighters had shown why their species were considered among the galaxy's greatest warriors. After several more matches of similar quality, it was time for the first human to fight. Sergeant Marcus Rivera walked onto the arena floor carrying a simple katana in a plain black sheath. He wore no armor except light protection over vital areas. His clothing was dark and practical, designed for movement rather than ceremony. The crowd quieted as they got their first close look at a human warrior. Marcus was not impressive by alien standards. He was average height with brown hair and calm eyes. He moved efficiently but showed none of the flowing grace that marked a true energy blade master. His opponent was announced, Velthara, the Moon Dancer, a young Veltar warrior with 40 years of training. She was considered one of the rising stars of her generation, known for the beauty of her combat forms and the precision of her technique. Velthara entered the arena like poetry in motion. Her energy blade cast silver light that seemed to flow like liquid mercury. She wore traditional Veltar combat armor that enhanced her natural grace, making every movement appear effortless. The 2 fighters met in the center of the arena. The size difference was notable. Velthara was tall and elegant, her 6 arms allowing for combat techniques impossible for other species. Marcus looked ordinary by comparison, just a human with a piece of sharpened metal. "This will be educational," General Kethvash commented from the VIP section. "The young human will learn why energy blades are the pinnacle of weapons technology." The formal preliminaries began. Velthara performed the salute of the silver moon, her blade creating patterns of light that drew gasps of admiration from the crowd. The movement was flawless, demonstrating decades of perfect training. Marcus simply drew his katana and held it ready. He made no ceremonial gestures, performed no traditional forms. He just stood and waited. The crowd murmured in confusion. Where was the human's opening display? How could he show respect for his opponent and the sacred nature of combat without proper ceremony? "Combat begins," the Arbiter announced. Velthara immediately flowed into the first form of the moon dance. Her blade moved in silver arcs as she approached Marcus with the traditional opening sequence. The technique was beautiful and precise, designed to test her opponent's defenses while displaying her own skill. Marcus took 2 quick steps forward and cut her down. The arena fell completely silent. It happened so fast that most spectators missed it entirely. One moment Velthara was performing the elegant opening moves of her combat style. The next moment she was on the ground, her energy blade flickering out as the neural connection was disrupted by unconsciousness. Marcus had simply ignored her ceremonial approach and attacked directly. His katana moved in a diagonal cut that bypassed her traditional defenses completely. The strike hit her temple with the flat of the blade, delivering a knockout blow that ended the fight instantly. The entire sequence took 4 seconds. Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor to treat Velthara. She was unconscious but not seriously injured. The flat strike had been perfectly calculated to disable without causing permanent damage. The crowd remained silent as they tried to understand what had happened. This was not how energy blade combat worked. Where was the artistry? Where were the traditional forms? Where was the 27 minutes of skillful exchange? Decisive victory to the human fighter, the arbiter announced, his voice uncertain. The rules were clear, even if the situation was unprecedented. Velthara could not continue, so Marcus had won. Emperor Zethamora leaned forward in his royal box, studying the human warrior with new interest. In 60 years of attending tournaments, he had never seen anything like what just happened. General Kethavash stood up abruptly, his metal face showing something that might have been shock. Demand an investigation, he told his aide. The human must have used some form of technology enhancement. This is impossible, but the investigation found nothing. Marcus carried only steel and wore no technological aids. Medical scanners showed that he was completely unmodified. Just a normal human with normal human abilities. Dr. Melthana, the weapons expert who had predicted human failure, appeared on emergency news broadcast trying to explain what the galaxy had witnessed. The energy blade requires perfect mental discipline, she said, her usual confidence shaken. When the Veltar warrior lost consciousness, the neural connection was severed and the weapon deactivated. But this should not have been possible. Human weapons cannot penetrate Veltar defenses. Then how do you explain what happened? The news anchor asked. I cannot, Dr. Melthana admitted. The human warrior completely ignored established combat doctrine. He attacked immediately, without ceremony, without warning. He used his primitive weapon in a way that circumvented the energy blade's advantages. The tournament continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The remaining human fighters were now watched with intense interest rather than casual amusement. What other surprises might these primitive warriors have? Linda Kim fought next, facing a Moldavan warrior named Greshatol the Blade Weaver. The Moldavan were known for their spinning energy blade techniques, creating whirlwinds of plasma that could attack from multiple angles simultaneously. Greshtol began his traditional opening, spinning his blade in the complex patterns that gave his style its name. The energy weapon created a barrier of superheated plasma that seemed impossible to penetrate. Linda waited until he completed his opening sequence, then threw her rapier like a spear. Greshtol's energy blade automatically shut down when it detected an incoming projectile, a safety feature designed to prevent accidents during training. In the split second while he was defenseless, Linda closed the distance and tackled him to the ground, ending the fight with a submission hold she had learned in human military training. Fight time, 8 seconds. Robert Jackson faced a crystalline, collective warrior whose diamond-hard skin was supposed to be nearly indestructible. Robert won by simply hitting his opponent in the head with the pommel of his sword, using a technique that had nothing to do with cutting or thrusting. Fight time, 6 seconds. By the end of the first day, 3 human fighters had competed and all 3 had won. None of they. The second day of the tournament brought changes. News of the human victories had spread across the galaxy overnight. Billions of beings watched the broadcasts, trying to understand how primitive weapons had defeated energy blade masters. The Veltar delegation spent the night in emergency strategy sessions. General Kethavash gathered his remaining warriors and showed them footage of the human fights frame by frame. Study this carefully, he told them. The humans fight without honor, without tradition, without respect for proper combat forms. They attack immediately, use tricks and deceptions, and ignore all established protocols. Master Drillmoth, one of the veteran warriors, raised his hand. General, perhaps we should adapt our techniques to counter their irregular methods. Adapt? Kethavash's voice showed his disgust. We do not adapt to barbarism. We demonstrate why civilization is superior to savagery. Tomorrow you will show the galaxy that proper energy blade technique cannot be defeated by primitive tactics. But other species were thinking differently. The Jacteri had lost a fighter to human tactics, and they were not too proud to learn from defeat. Commander Zeltok called his warriors together in their training room. The humans have shown us something important, he said. We have been fighting ourselves for so long that we forgot combat has other purposes besides displaying skill. What do you mean, Commander? Asked one of his fighters. Watch this footage again. The human does not try to defeat the energy blade. He defeats the warrior holding it. While our fighter focused on weapon technique, the human focused on ending the fight quickly. The Jacteri began modifying their approach. They practiced faster openings, tried to eliminate the ceremonial elements that left them vulnerable, and worked on techniques designed to stop rather than showcase. The crystalline collective also adapted their strategy. Their diamond-hard skin made them nearly invulnerable to cutting weapons. But the humans had shown that not all attacks involved cutting. They began training to counter strikes to the head and joints. When the second day began, the alien fighters came to the arena with new tactics. They were still bound by thousands of years of tradition, but they tried to modify their techniques to counter human unpredictability. The first human to fight that day was David Park, facing Molthaven Credoc the Stone Splitter. Credoc was a Jacteri warrior who had studied the previous day's footage carefully. Instead of the traditional opening ceremony, he moved immediately into a defensive stance. David approached cautiously. This opponent was not going to give him the easy opening that traditional fighters provided. The Jacteri held his energy blade in a guard position, ready to counter any immediate attack. But David had also studied footage. He knew that energy blades had safety protocols that could be exploited. He drew 2 throwing knives and hurled them at his opponent simultaneously from different angles. The energy blade safety systems detected incoming projectiles and automatically shut down to prevent dangerous interactions. In that brief moment of vulnerability, David closed the distance with his main weapon. But Credoc was ready. He abandoned his energy blade entirely and tackled David to the ground, using his forearms to try for a wrestling victory. The 2 fighters grappled for nearly 20 seconds before David managed to apply a sleeper hold that rendered the alien unconscious. It was the longest human fight so far, but still far shorter than traditional energy blade combat. The next match brought even more surprises. Linda Kim faced Master Velshara, a Veltar warrior who had completely abandoned ceremonial openings. Velshara activated her energy blade and immediately attacked with quick, direct strikes aimed at ending the fight rapidly. But she had made a crucial error. In abandoning the traditional forms that had been perfected over centuries, she was trying to improvise techniques that humans had been developing for thousands of years. Her attacks were aggressive but sloppy, lacking the precision that made energy blade combat effective. Linda countered with a fighting style that the aliens had never seen. She used her rapier defensively while moving constantly, making herself a difficult target. When Velshara overextended on an aggressive thrust, Linda disarmed her with a technique from human fencing traditions. The energy blade flew across the arena floor and deactivated when it lost contact with its user. Velshara found herself facing an armed opponent while completely defenseless. She yielded immediately. Emperor Zeth Mora watched these developments with growing fascination. The humans were not just winning through tricks or luck. They were forcing the galaxy's greatest warriors to abandon techniques that had been perfected over millennia, and the aliens were losing because they had no experience fighting outside their traditional methods. Fascinating, he murmured to his advisor. The humans are not superior warriors. They are simply different warriors. They approach combat from a completely different philosophical foundation. The day's most anticipated match came when Robert Jackson faced General Kethvash himself. The Veltar commander had decided to demonstrate personally why energy blade mastery could not be defeated by primitive weapons. Kethvash entered the arena like a force of nature. His energy blade cast brilliant white light that seemed to push back shadows throughout the massive space. He moved with the perfect grace that came from 60 years of disciplined training. Robert looked ordinary by comparison. He was a big man, broad and strong, but he showed none of the elegant bearing that marked a true warrior. His broadsword was well-made steel, but it seemed crude compared to the magnificent energy weapon his opponent carried. "Human," Kethvash said formally, "I offer you the chance to yield now and avoid the shame of defeat." "Thanks for the offer," Robert replied, "but I think I'll stick around for the fight." The general performed a traditional salute, but it was brief and perfunctory. He had learned from watching the previous human victories. No long ceremonies that could be exploited. When combat began, Kethvash immediately pressed the attack. His energy blade moved in patterns of light that were too fast for most eyes to follow. He used advanced techniques that should have overwhelmed any opponent, especially one with inferior weapons. But Robert had advantages that the general did not understand. His broadsword was heavier than an energy blade, which gave his strikes more momentum. His human physiology allowed for sudden changes in direction that the Veltar's more rigid body structure could not match. Most importantly, Robert fought without the mental restrictions that limited energy blade users. Kethavas had been trained to think of combat as an art form with rules and traditions. Robert had been trained to think of combat as a problem to be solved quickly. The fight lasted 30 seconds, longer than any previous human victory. Kethavas was simply too skilled to be defeated easily, but in the end, experience with traditional opponents worked against him. Robert used a technique that would have been impossible against another energy blade user. He grabbed his own sword blade with his offhand, using the weapon like a long-handled hammer to strike at unexpected angles. The move would have been suicidal against a plasma weapon that could cut through anything, but against a disciplined opponent who fought by rules, it created an opening. The pommel strike that ended the fight was delivered with enough force to dent the general's helmet. Kethavas collapsed unconscious, his energy blade flickering out as neural contact was lost. The arena fell silent. The greatest Veltar warrior of his generation had been defeated by a human with a piece of sharpened metal. Dr. Melthana appeared on emergency broadcasts again, trying to explain the impossible to a galaxy that had believed energy blades were unbeatable. "The humans are forcing our warriors to fight outside their training," she said. "Energy blade combat has evolved over thousands of years to counter other energy blade techniques, but the humans use methods that our weapons and traditions were never designed to handle." "Are you saying that human weapons are superior?" the anchor asked. "No," Dr. Melthana replied. "I am saying that human fighters are approaching combat from a completely different perspective. Our warriors trained for decades to perfect techniques that make energy blade fighting beautiful and precise. Human fighters train to end fights quickly by any means necessary." In the Veltar quarters, the mood was grim. General Kethavas had regained consciousness but was clearly shaken by his defeat. The greatest energy blade master in the galaxy had been beaten by primitive weapons and crude tactics. "Perhaps," suggested Master Drillmoth carefully, "we should study their methods more closely. Try to understand how they approach combat differently than we do. Study barbarian fighting," Kethavas snapped. "Abandon techniques that have brought victory for centuries in favor of crude brawling." "Not abandon," Drillmoth said, "but perhaps expand. Learn from their approach as they have clearly learned from ours." Other species were having similar conversations. The tournament had become something unexpected. Instead of a showcase for traditional energy blade mastery, it was turning into a lesson about the nature of combat itself. The humans had shown that technique, tradition, and advanced technology could be defeated by fighters who understood that the purpose of combat was not to demonstrate skill or follow rules. The purpose of combat was to win. But the aliens were beginning to learn. They were adapting their ancient techniques, abandoning ceremonial elements, and focusing on practical effectiveness rather than artistic beauty. The final day of the tournament arrived with tension that could be felt throughout the orbital station. Half the galaxy watched as the remaining fighters prepared for the championship rounds. Everything had changed from what anyone expected. Only 8 fighters remained from the original field of hundreds. 3 were human: Captain Sarah Chen, Marcus Rivera, and Linda Kim. The alien survivors included Overlord Kethavas, the greatest living Veltar warrior who had recovered from his defeat and fought his way back to the finals. The other alien survivors had all adapted their fighting styles. They moved faster, abandoned ceremonial techniques, and focused on ending fights quickly. The humans had forced an evolution in galactic combat doctrine in just 3 days. Emperor Zethmora addressed the crowd before the final matches began. His words were broadcast to billions of beings across known space. "This tournament has shown us truths we had forgotten," he said. "For too long, we believed that advanced technology and perfect technique were enough to guarantee victory. The humans have reminded us that the warrior matters more than the weapon." The crowd was different too. Instead of expecting beautiful artistic displays of energy blade mastery, they now watched with the intensity of beings witnessing something historic. Combat was no longer just art or entertainment. It had become a test of fundamental principles. The semi-final matches began. Marcus Rivera faced Gralmoth the Eternal, a Jacteri who had completely revolutionized his fighting style. Instead of the traditional spinning blade techniques, Gralmoth now fought with direct, efficient strikes designed to counter human unpredictability. The fight lasted nearly 2 minutes, the longest of the entire tournament. Gralmoth had learned to fight like a human while retaining the advantages of his forearms and energy blade technology. Marcus won finally through pure endurance. outlasting an opponent who was not accustomed to sustained combat. Linda Kim lost her semi-final to Master Velthanor, a young Veltar who had studied human techniques so thoroughly that he fought more like Earth military than traditional energy blade style. It was the first human defeat of the tournament. That left Captain Sarah Chen to face Overlord Kethvash in the final match. It was fitting that the tournament would end with the human leader against the greatest alien warrior. Both fighters had evolved during the tournament. Kethvash had abandoned most traditional Veltar techniques in favor of practical combat methods. Chen had learned to respect the precision and power of energy blade technology. They met in the center of the arena as billions watched. Kethvash activated his energy blade, but instead of the elaborate ceremonies of traditional combat, he simply took a ready stance. Chen drew her katana and mirrored his preparedness. "You have taught us much, human," Kethvash said formally. "You have shown us that we had forgotten the true purpose of our art." "You have taught us too," Chen replied. "Your discipline and precision are beyond anything we imagined possible." "Combat begins," the Arbiter announced. The final fight began differently than any other in the tournament. Both warriors moved with careful respect for their opponent's abilities. There were no immediate rushes, no desperate attempts at quick victory. Kethvash attacked with strikes that combined energy blade precision with human-style unpredictability. His plasma weapon moved in patterns that no traditional fighter would recognize, flowing between formal techniques and improvised attacks. Chen countered with movements that showed she had learned from watching alien combat all week. Her katana moved with new precision, incorporating some of the flowing grace of energy blade style, while retaining the direct efficiency of human swordsmanship. The crowd watched in absolute silence as the two fighters tested each other. This was no longer about energy blades versus steel or tradition versus innovation. This was about two warriors who had learned from each other, facing off with everything they had gained. The fight lasted 5 minutes, longer than any previous human combat. Kethvash was adapting in real time, using techniques he had never practiced but understood intuitively. Chen was doing the same, responding to energy blade attacks with counters that combined human practicality with alien precision. Then Chen did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She threw her katana, but unlike the throws that had won earlier human victories, this was not a desperate attempt to exploit safety protocols. This was calculated strategy. As Kethvash's energy blade automatically shut down to avoid the incoming projectile, Chen was already moving. She had drawn a second weapon, a shorter blade that Kenji had hidden in her boot. Kethvash realized what was happening and reactivated his energy blade with incredible speed. But Chen was inside his guard now, too close for the longer plasma weapon to be effective. The decisive exchange happened in fractions of a second. Chen's shorter blade stopped just short of Kethvash's throat. At the same moment, his energy blade stopped just short of her heart. Both warriors froze, each holding weapons that could kill their opponent instantly. "Yield," Chen said quietly. "Yield," Kethvash replied at the same time. The Arbiter stared at the impossible situation. In 10,000 years of tournament history, nothing like this had ever happened. Both fighters had achieved killing positions simultaneously. Both had stopped short of delivering fatal strikes. Both had yielded to their opponent. Emperor Zethamora stood up in his royal box. As the highest authority present, the decision was his to make. "I declare both warriors victorious," he announced. "They have shown us that true mastery comes not from the weapon or the technique, but from the wisdom to know when not to use them." The crowd erupted in cheers that seemed to shake the very foundations of the orbital station. It was not the ending anyone had expected, but it was perfect. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The Galactic Combat Academy was established on Nexus Prime, with both human and alien instructors. Energy blade users learned human tactics, while human fighters studied alien precision and discipline. Kenji Nakamura opened a forge where he taught alien smiths to work with steel, while Veltar masters showed humans how to achieve perfect mental discipline. Marcus Rivera started a training program where warriors learned to adapt traditional techniques to practical combat situations. Captain Chen found herself appointed as the Academy's first director of integrated combat studies. Her job was to develop new fighting styles that combined the best of both approaches, the artistry and precision of energy blade combat with the practical, Effectiveness of human warfare. We were both right and both wrong, she explained to the first class of mixed human and alien students. Energy blades are magnificent weapons that require incredible skill to master. Steel swords are simple tools that can be devastatingly effective in the right hands. She drew her katana and activated a training energy blade she had learned to use. But weapons are just tools. The real strength comes from understanding that combat has many purposes. Sometimes it is art, sometimes it is sport, sometimes it is survival. The greatest warriors are those who can adapt their approach to serve the right purpose at the right time. The students, both human and alien, watched carefully as she demonstrated techniques that combined flowing energy blade forms with direct human strikes. It was something new, a fusion of traditions that created possibilities neither culture had imagined alone. General Keth Vash, now serving as the Academy's master of traditional forms, added his own perspective. For centuries, we believed that perfection meant never changing, he said. The humans showed us that perfection means always being ready to learn something new. Our energy blades are still superior technology. Our traditional forms are still works of art, but they are more effective when combined with human understanding of practical combat. Dr. Wright, now the Academy's chief tactical analyst, published papers that became required reading across the galaxy. His studies showed that the tournament had not just been about humans versus aliens or steel versus energy blades. It had been about the evolution of combat itself. Fixed tactics, no matter how perfect, become weaknesses when facing an opponent who refuses to follow the same rules, he wrote. The humans won not because they were better warriors, but because they approached the fundamental problem of combat from a completely different angle. Years later, when combat tournaments resumed, they looked nothing like the old competitions. Fighters used energy blades and steel swords, traditional forms and improvised techniques, artistic display and practical effectiveness. The rigid categories that had defined galactic combat for millennia had given way to something more fluid and adaptive. The humans had earned their place in galactic society not through superior technology or mystical abilities, but through a simple reminder that had been forgotten over centuries of refinement. The purpose of learning to fight was not to create beautiful art or follow ancient traditions. The purpose of learning to fight was to survive, to protect and to win when victory mattered. But perhaps more importantly, they had also learned when not to fight at all. The final duel between Chen and Kethvash became legend, not because of the techniques displayed, but because both warriors chose Restro.